Welcome to the channel. If you like the videos, please press the thumbs up icon. It helps promote the content via the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you'd like to be notified about new stories.
Story 34. My mom texts my dad about a truth she didn't want me to know. So, I, 25F, had a sometimes strangely distant relationship with my mom while growing up and didn't know why. My dad was always loving and caring and treated me with the same love he had for my siblings. This all ended a few years ago when Dad took me out for lunch. He stepped away to go to the bathroom and left his phone on the table. As soon as he walked away, a text from my mom popped up on the screen that simply said, "Please don't tell her. She doesn't need the drama in her life right now." A few seconds later, another text pops up saying, "We agreed that you would let me handle it. I know I was supposed to tell her, but the right time hasn't come yet." No additional texts popped up on her phone while Dad was in the bathroom. When he returned to the table, he immediately knew something was wrong because of the look on my face. When he sat down, he asked me what was wrong. I was still sort of out of it and just said, "Mom sent you a text." My dad takes his phone, looks at the message, and starts cussing, slamming his phone on the table. He has a mad look on his face, which makes me start apologizing when he interrupts me. He holds up his hand and says, "No, not your fault." He pulled out his wallet and waved to the waiter to pay. He stood up and told me it was time we went for a walk and talked about something that should have happened years ago. At this point in my life, I was 18 and heading off to college on a full scholarship in a couple of weeks. My dad and I walked through a nearby park and sat on a bench in front of the lake. He sat there collecting his thoughts long enough that I wondered if he would speak. He looked at me and said a sentence that changed my life forever. My dad looked me in the eye and said, "Sweetie, you know that I love you, and please know that your mother loves you too." Waiting for me to nod, he continued, 19 years ago, I came home from work and found your mother with another man in our bed." I about passed out from this statement and felt dizzy. It was a good thing I was already sitting. My dad tells me that he and my mom had separated while my dad took some time to work through her infidelity. He paused, took a deep, shuddering breath, and told me that I was not his biological daughter. She had gotten pregnant during her affair. When she found out that she was pregnant, she decided to have an abortion, but Dad said no, and made it part of the list of demands to save their marriage. He told me honestly that he doesn't believe in abortion, and that even though I might not be his, biologically, he didn't care. I won't go through the emotions that I endured during that conversation, but let's just say that my world makes a lot more sense now. My dad then told me that my biological father had passed away about 5 years ago. He said my mom might be able to put me in touch with his family if that was what I wanted. He told me the man had kids, so I had more siblings I hadn't met. I sat there with my dad, crying over my situation. As you can imagine, it was pretty shocking to me and a lot to digest. I was angry with my mom, but more for what she did to my dad. The fact that she wanted to abort me was something I needed to set aside or go insane. When our conversation wound down and I had control of myself, Dad texted Mom. I told her. After that, his phone started blowing up, and he shut it off. I asked my dad if this was why Mom didn't show me the affection that she showed my older brother and sister. He had a sad look on his face and said that once it was clear that I wasn't my father's baby, she knew I would be a constant reminder to him going forward. He said she loved me but felt like showing more love for me in any way would make my dad upset. He said he'd talked to her about it over the last 18 years, and it would get better. Then, in times when there was stress in their relationship, she would fall back into the pattern of treating his biological kids better. I guess I could understand it in a way, but that didn't make it less traumatic or painful for me. The last thing my dad told me was that now that I was an adult moving out of the house, he would finally leave my mom. Dad said he loved her but could never put the trust issue behind him. He said that every time Mom would go out or work late or a dozen other behaviors would make him think she wasn't being faithful to him. He said he needed some time to find himself. I didn't know what to say and didn't want my parents to divorce. I was holding on to him, and he just held me that way until I was cried out. He gave me a kiss and a long hug and told me that I would always be his daughter and that he would love me for as long as he lived. It's now a few years later, and I'm finished with my undergraduate degree and heading off to my dream college for my master's in engineering. My dad and mom divorced during my freshman year in college. He stayed in the relationship until they empty nested. Dad gave the house to my mom, even though the post-nup he made her sign as part of the agreement to stay together after the cheating episode. The deal allowed him to walk away with everything in the event of a divorce. My dad still loves my mom, and they still go out together regularly, but Dad has his own place a few miles away. He told us that he just needed some time to focus on himself. He wants to figure out what the last half of his life will look like. He said he had no intention of walking away from Mom. He just wanted to see how their relationship worked without being pressured to stay for the kids. My mom is still trying to get him back, and honestly, we all hope she wins that contest. My mom and I had a long and ugly conversation before I left for college, and she agreed that we would do therapy sessions every time I came home on break. There was a lot of guilt on her part about not only the affair, but how she treated me, and the fact she hid this from me and the rest of the family. These sessions were brutal for us both, but they did help. We are in a better place, and she's now able and willing to treat me like my siblings. She's even going overboard to make up for it. When my siblings found out about my birth situation, they were stunned and angry at Mom, but my dad stopped it from getting out of control. My brother and sister don't treat me any differently now than they always did. My sister and I are still very close and do everything together. We both sat and cried, not for us, but for my dad. I can't even imagine what he went through for 19 years. The first time I saw my brother after the bombshell revelation was just a few weeks later. I was sitting outside chatting with my sister when he arrived with his girlfriend. It was strange, but he seemed like himself and came over to sit with us. We all talked as usual about what was happening in our lives, as if nothing had changed. When I finally asked him how he felt about it, he stood, wrapped his arms around me, and hugged me so hard that he picked me off my feet. Then he threw me into the swimming pool like he always did when we were kids. While I was away at school again for my grad studies, I did an ancestry test to see if I could find any of my siblings from my bio father's side. My half-sister Jessica contacted me through the app shortly after receiving the results. We chatted through the app until we were comfortable enough to exchange phone numbers. The first time we spoke, we spent hours on the phone. It started off a little slow and cautious, but I ended up giving her the full story as I knew it from my dad. Jessica seemed fascinated by my life, and eventually told me that our shared father had another child out of wedlock with her mom. She reached out to her half-brother a few years back, and they still talk. Jessica told me that she hasn't shared these connections with her mom because of the hurt it would cause her. I told her that I would honor her decisions and not make any attempts to contact anyone else on that side of the family. Jessica thanked me and said there might be a time they figured it out for themselves. She said she'd be there for support if that happened. Then she gave me her half-brother's name and said he was probably on my ancestry list. He was, though the app gave him a much smaller DNA match. Jessica and I talk regularly, but I haven't mentioned her to anyone else in my family. I guess we are each other's little family secret. Just to be clear to everyone, I consider my dad to really be my father. He was all I ever knew, and I love him as much now as I ever did. In a way, we are even closer since I see the sacrifice he made for me when he could have walked away. His actions literally saved my life.
I only post new and unique content. Please like and subscribe.